Good morning. So I'm going to inform you about some additional things on the graphing calculator that you did not learn in those first couple pages of the packet. The first couple pages are very important because they introduce you to the correct names for the keys on the calculator, as well as making sure you know where some keys are that you hadn't used before. The calculator should have been all set for you when you began. So we will continue to change some settings so you see where those are at. If you look on the next page, the activity says exploring polynomial graphs and that you will need two different colored pencils. Those are on the back table. Please take two different colors. So, don't take blue and blue. Okay, you're smarter than that. So anyway, I need to show you some additional things that the particular sheet doesn't tell you. And so the first is how to clear the screen when you're in a graph. So let's say that you had done this before. I think it was x plus 2 that you had entered before, and then you had graphed that. And now what if you want to get out of that screen if you had trouble with that? You notice that above the word mode here at the top row, we have second key, and next to it, it says mode. Above mode, it says quit in blue. So if you go second and then mode, excuse me, that was not supposed to happen. If you go second and then mode, then it'll return you to what we call the home screen. Okay. So it looks like I'm going to have a tiny calculator. All right. So the next thing I wanted to tell you about is talk to you for a minute about is when do you use the negative sign and when do you use the minus sign? So if your expression that you're typing in has, I'm sorry, I can't, here we go, has something like negative 2x minus 3. Okay, this sign that's out in front would be a negative sign. So that's the sign that's below the 3 on the graphing calculator, the one at the bottom. This sign, since it's inside the expression, would be the minus sign. Sorry, that's written really sloppy, but the minus sign is the one over here with the operational symbols. So if it comes in front, use the negative sign. If it comes behind, inside the expression, use the minus sign. If you confuse that, if you put a minus sign in front, it'll tell you an error. But if you use the negative sign here, it'll actually take negative 2x and multiply it times negative 3, and you'll end up graphing and getting answers for 6x. So that's really important that you use the minus sign inside the expression because it will not tell you that it's wrong. Okay, the next thing I wanted to talk to you about is setting it to ask. So if you look again, I'm on the third page of the note guide where it says exploring polynomial graphs. And the first thing it does is it says set your calculator window. So we go to the window button, which is right here. And it says set the x min at -6. So x min I'm going to change to -6. And then I'm going to arrow down and change x max. Whoops, sorry about that. And I think I made the classic error that I just talked to you about. You can't use the minus sign. You have to use the negative sign, -6. Sorry about that. I typed it on my keyboard. Okay, so then we go down to x max, and it's +6. And this is going to make it so that it's sort of like we're zoomed in, but we'll get a nice picture of our graphs here. And then for y min, we're going to use -5. And for y max, we're going to use 5. Everything else we're going to leave alone. Then it says to classify each polynomial. So for example, we're going to do number 1 together here. So number 1, it says y equals 2x, oh my goodness, 2x. There we go. Sorry about this. This does not want to work well here. 2x, come on baby, 2x minus 3. And so we're going to type this in, and we've changed the window already, but we need to classify this, sorry. So if x is to the first power, it's linear. This is just not writing well. If x is to the second power, I hope you're thinking ahead of me about what it's going to be. It's going to be quadratic. This might be better if I try to type it. If x is to the third power, it is cubic. It is better. If x is to the fourth power, it is, sorry, trying to get the right here. Quartic, Q-U-A-R-T-I-C, like quarter. If x is to the fifth power, then it's quintic. Okay. So this very first one is x to the first power. If we look back up here at the top, 2x to the first power minus 3, so it's linear. So that's the classify part of these questions. You want to remember these. And I don't think that there's anything above fifth power, but if there were, then you would just name it by the power. You'd say it's a 6th degree, a 7th degree, and so on. So that's the classify part. Okay, the next thing I wanted to talk to you about is then how do you get these numbers when the input is x is negative 100 and so on. Well, I'm going to first make sure that I have typed into my y editor this equation. So I'm going to clear out the old equation and I'm going to type in 2x minus 3. And this is minus because it's inside the expression. Notice that there's this darkness around the equal sign. That means this equation is on and we want it to be on. Okay, so now I can graph that. So I'm just going to go graph. I don't want to do zoom 6. That would reset my window, and I've just set my window to where I want it. So here's my nice picture, and I would draw that onto my paper as accurately as I can. And then in order to fill in that table, I'm going to look at the table. The table you see above graph, it says table, and that's in blue. So if I go second and graph, I get to a table. Now, this table starts at 0 and goes up. Your table might start at any different place right now because who knows who's been using it. But the problem is 100 or negative 100 is a long way for me to arrow back to. So instead of doing that, I can do this. Pay close attention, and then you can rewind this and watch it again if you want to. Above window, it says table set. So I'm going to go second and window, and I get to the table settings. Now here's where you can tell where you want the table to start. That means what's the first x value you want to show on your table. Mine's at -6 right now. Delta table means how much do you want those x values to change by each time? Do you want it to go, right now mine's going up by 1s or down by 1s, but I could set that to 10, 100, 50, 0.10, 0.25, whatever I want it to go up by the x values. I'm not going to change that, but instead, if I come down here, it says independent. Independent is always the input number, which is the x number. So I'm going to tell it, instead of it being automatic, I'm going to come over here and change it to ask. By doing that, I'm telling the calculator, I don't want you to just give me numbers. I want to ask you which number I want. Now, when I go back to the table, it's going to look different. So to get back to the table, I go second and a graph, and that gives me the table. And now it's all blank. My equation is still in the y editor, and the calculator knows that. So now I'm going to ask at these x numbers. So when I type in -100 and then hit enter, it tells me the y value that goes with that particular x number. Then I can put in the next one, -10. Make sure you're using the negative key, not the minus key. Then I get -23. 0 is the next one. and then 10, and then 100. And there's all my answers for my table. Now, the reason I'm having you do this is we're going to come back when I'm on Thursday. We're going to come back on Thursday, and we're going to talk about those numbers on the table. We're going to pay attention to those. We're going to think about those. But for now, you just fill them in. I will warn you, sometime you might get an answer that looks kind of weird. Like it might look like this. Maybe your output number over here in Y looks like 2E, and then a number like maybe, I think there's one that's 2E6. That's a 6. Weird looking 6. Okay. This is actually scientific notation on your calculator. Now, if you know how to correctly change that to the true scientific notation, you're free to do that. But if you just want to write in that little box on your sheet 2E6, that's okay with me at this point, okay? So you can just copy the numbers from the calculator. And then, of course, to get out of here, I can just go second and quit. And then I can go to the next problem. So I'm going to go to Y equals. I'm going to type in my new equation, which is negative 2x minus 3. So make sure you use the negative sign down here, the negative sign, negative 2x minus 3. And then you're going to do the same thing. You're going to go through those same steps. Okay, so again, to get back to my home screen, I just go second and mode, which is quit. And then the last thing I'll mention is if you look at number 11 on your sheet, now you're not nearly ready to do number 11, but it says write the equations of the functions who have one end pointing up and one end pointing down. I think that's pretty straightforward, but I did have a student today ask, well, which ones do you want me to look at? Look at all of the ones that you've graphed, numbers 1 through 10. Look at all of those and then write the equations of the ones where one end is going up and one end is going down. Finally, the last thing is if you turn yet another page in your note guide, you come to a dotted line and it says graphs of linear functions. Write a great big stop there. Do not go on. When you come to graphs of linear functions, stop and do not go any farther. You should be able to do everything up to that point. It is okay to confer with your partner. It is not okay to confer with the people on the other side of the room, but it is okay to confer with your partner as you work through this. If you shouldn't finish before the end of the class, you can go to www.desmos.com, and there is a free online graphing calculator that should take you through everything that we've just done. The only part that it may not have is the table, but if you can get all the classifying and graphs drawn and then do the questions following that, then we'll be fine. We can fill in that those tables later if we have to. All right, have a great afternoon, and I'll see you on Thursday.